The sterile silence of Olympus Medical's ICU was a heavy shroud, broken only by the flatlined hum of machines. Dr. Viktor Volkov, head of neurosurgery, a figure of polished authority, delivered the grim verdict: Captain Mateo Rodriguez is brain dead. Anoxic injury, intractable cerebral edema. Time of death confirmed. The words, a death knell for the city's heroic firefighter, settled like ash in the hushed room. Dr. Mei Lin, chief resident, nodded, her face a mask of practiced stoicism, already directing the preparations for organ donation, a grim, efficient process for a life deemed beyond saving. Rookie nurse Zara Al-Ghamdi, a quiet presence by the vitals monitor, felt a cold dread twist in her gut. Her gaze, honed in the unforgiving chaos of makeshift war-zone clinics, fixated on Mateo's still form. Below the thrumming monitors and complex wires, she saw it, a barely perceptible tremor in his left hand, a flicker in his eyelid, so minute, it was invisible to the tech-reliant specialists, yet screamingly loud to her. They saw a cadaver, a tragic statistic. Zara saw a ghost of life, a defiant spark. A voice of doubt, humble and unheard, stirred fiercely within her. They were wrong. Mateo wasn't gone. He just needed someone to truly see him, and against all odds, Zara would be that someone. This wasn't over, not yet. Olympus Medical Center gleamed, a testament to medical advancement and staggering wealth. Polished chrome reflected the sterile glow of LED panels, filtering light into Mateo Rodriguez's private ICU suite, an environment of hushed efficiency that Zara found both awe-inspiring and unsettling. Every monitor hummed with data, every infusion pump whirred with precision, yet it all felt impossibly cold. This wasn't the dust-choked, sweat-stained urgency of the field clinics Zara knew, where a rusty scalpel and a gut feeling often stood between life and death. Here, expertise was measured in certifications, publications, and the gleam of the latest diagnostic hardware. Dr. Viktor Volkov, head of neurotrauma, was a monument to Olympus's ethos. Tall, impeccably dressed even in scrubs, he moved with the authoritative grace of a man who commanded both rooms and multi-million-dollar machines. His eyes, sharp and dismissive, barely registered Zara's presence as he reviewed the final brainstem reflex assessments on a tablet. Pupils fixed and dilated bilaterally, he announced, a pronouncement rather than an observation. Absent corneal, oculocephalic, vestibulo-ocular reflexes. Gag and cough reflexes absent. Apnea test confirms no spontaneous respiratory effort. His voice, a low rumble, left no room for dissent. Brain death confirmed. The family has been informed. Dr. Mei Lin, brilliant and precise, stood a respectful step behind Volkov. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, perfect bun, her expression a study in focused determination. She was already coordinating with the organ transplant team, her voice low and efficient into her headset. Retrieval protocols initiated. ETA on the OR team, 20 minutes. To her, Zara was simply a pair of hands, a peripheral functionary in the grand ballet of medical intervention and, now, its tragic conclusion. Zara, however, couldn't shake the disquiet stirring within her. The subtle tremor in Mateo's left hand, the almost imperceptible flicker of his eyelid, they clung to her awareness like burrs. She had seen similar things before, in places where CT scanners were luxuries, and a physician's most advanced tool was often their own highly trained senses. She cleared her throat, her voice barely a whisper in the echoing room. Dr. Lin? Mei Lin paused, turning with an impatient tilt of her head. Yes, Nurse Al-Ghamdi? Her tone was polite but frigid, a clear signal not to waste her time. I noticed a slight motor response earlier. A tremor in his left hand. And a minute flicker in his eyelid, just now. Zara gestured tentatively towards Mateo. Could it be a localized neural discharge, perhaps unrelated to the brainstem, indicating? Volkov scoffed without looking up from his tablet. Nurse, we have exhausted every diagnostic avenue. We have full-sequence MRI, dynamic CT perfusion scans, EEG, transcranial Doppler. He listed off the arsenal of Olympus's tech with proprietary pride. His brain is swollen beyond recovery. His brainstem reflexes are absent. These twitches you're observing are nothing more than spinal reflexes or artifact. Standard Neurological Textbook, page 47. He finally deigned to look at her, a patronizing smile twisting his lips. It's a common misconception among less experienced staff. Mei Lin stepped forward, her expression softening into an almost condescending pity. Zara, I understand you're new to Olympus. The protocols here are robust. Captain Rodriguez's anoxic brain injury has caused irreversible damage. The cerebral edema is intractable. Anything you're seeing is post-mortem fasciculation or autonomic neuropathy, not meaningful brain activity. We've been over this. She gave Zara a pointed, dismissive look, then turned back to her preparations. Focus on securing lines and ensuring vital stability for transport, please. The humiliation stung, hot and sharp, but Zara had faced worse than a doctor's condescension. She had faced bombs, famine, and the cold indifference of triage in overcrowded tents. Her less experienced staff status, her modesty, her very quietude, made her invisible here, a ghost in the gleaming machine. But Mateo's faint signs weren't disappearing. They were so faint, so easy to miss amidst the chaos of a declared death, but they were there. She moved to Mateo's bedside, her hands hovering, an instinctive urge to feel. The sleek, responsive machines provided numbers, graphs, waveforms, a deluge of data. But what about the information that didn't graph, didn't register on a sensor? Her mind drifted back, not to textbook pages, but to the dust-choked medical tents outside Aleppo. A young soldier, shrapnel in his temporal lobe, unresponsive, declared unsalvageable by the overworked local physician. But Zara, then a volunteer medic, had felt it, a minute pulsatile change near his temple, an almost imperceptible vibratory sensation under her fingertips, missed by the crude ultrasound they had. It was a skill born of necessity, honed in environments where sophisticated tech was a fantasy, and a human hand was often the only diagnostic tool. She'd called it a vascular whisper, a tiny, localized circulatory anomaly that indicated a microtear or spasm, creating a subtle pressure differential the brain was fighting. She'd convinced the doctor to open him up, to look. And they found it, a tiny, unruptured aneurysm, easily repaired, missed by everything else. The soldier lived. She looked at Mateo again, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the ventilator, his skin pale but not yet waxy. His anoxic injury and massive cerebral edema had certainly devastated much of his brain, but those minute flickers, that ghost of a tremor, they hinted at a localized struggle, a specific point of distress that wasn't being picked up by the global scans. Could it be another vascular whisper? A cerebral microtear, perhaps, so tiny that it evaded even Olympus's cutting-edge imaging, yet significant enough to prevent the brain from fully shutting down, causing those atypical, almost phantom signs. The organ donation team was assembling outside the room. The clock was ticking, not in minutes, but in the irreversible finality of a human life. Zara felt a cold surge of dread. This wasn't some remote war zone where her quiet conviction could sway a desperate, under-equipped doctor. This was Olympus, a fortress of scientific certainty, where a rookie nurse's unscientific observations were not just ignored, but actively ridiculed. But the alternative, letting Mateo go when she felt, deep in her bones, that he might still be clinging to life, was unthinkable. She had to try, even if it meant risking her career, her reputation, everything. She had to find a way to make them see. The quietest voice, she knew, could still change the world, if only someone would listen. The tension in the room was palpable, not from Mateo's critical state, but from the silent battle waging within Zara, against a system built to reject her truth. The sterile hum of the Olympus Medical Center's ICU was a stark contrast to the cacophony of the war zone clinics Zara had known. Here, every sound was controlled, every life-sustaining machine a testament to human ingenuity. Yet, beneath the pristine veneer, Zara felt the tremor of something vital, something missed, in Mateo's room. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady, despairing rhythm of the monitors. Outside, the organ donation team, a solemn group of surgeons and coordinators, were already assembling, their hushed voices a funereal murmur, their presence a cold, undeniable countdown. She took a fortifying breath, her lungs burning with the sudden rush of adrenaline. Dr. Volkov, a man whose tailored scrubs seemed as stiff and unyielding as his demeanor, stood with Dr. Lin, chief resident, by Mateo's bedside. They were reviewing the final chart, their faces etched with the grim finality of their diagnosis. Volkov's voice, a low rumble, cut through the quiet. The ICP is stabilizing at a level consistent with irreversible insult. Cerebral perfusion pressure is negligible. The apnea test confirmed brain death. It's time to prepare for retrieval. Zara stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Dr. Volkov, Dr. Lin, excuse me, but I've observed some atypical signs. Her voice, though soft, carried a surprising current of conviction. The subtle tremor in his left hand, the fleeting pupil oscillation, they're not consistent with complete cerebral infarction. They suggest, perhaps, a localized vascular struggle. Volkov, without even turning fully, offered a dismissive flick of his wrist. Nurse Al-Gamdi, we appreciate your attentiveness. But Captain Rodriguez has suffered anoxic brain injury. His brain has been comprehensively mapped. Every conceivable scan, from high-resolution MRI to advanced cerebral angiography, shows diffuse edema and no signs of salvageable function. These tremors are likely spinal reflexes, common in terminal neurological cases. His tone, dripping with condescension, was a clear signal to retreat. Dr. Lin, ever the rationalist, turned to Zara, her expression a mix of weary patience and professional certitude. Zara, we've reviewed the latest 7T MRI. There is no evidence of a focal lesion, no discernible microtear, no active hemorrhage that would account for anything beyond the anoxic damage. His cerebral perfusion pressure has been plummeting for hours. The brainstem reflexes are absent. These are textbook indicators of brain death. Your observations, while diligent, are likely subjective interpretations of expected terminal phenomena. She spoke with the authority of someone who lived and breathed protocol, for whom data was gospel. But Zara couldn't back down. The images in her mind were too vivid, the faces of patients in makeshift clinics, lives saved by touch when technology failed. Respectfully, doctors, the kind of microtear I suspect might not be visible on current scans, especially if it's a very small venous compromise causing a localized, dynamic pressure fluctuation. In environments where imaging was non-existent, we developed methods. Volkov finally turned, his eyes, cold and sharp, pinning her in place. Are you suggesting that your methods from, a mud-hut clinic, are superior to the diagnostics of Olympus Medical Center? Nurse, we have the most advanced neuroimaging suite in the Western Hemisphere. To suggest a mere palpation could detect what our multimillion-dollar machines cannot is not just naive, it's irresponsible. It wastes precious time and offers false hope. He practically spat the words, his face tightening with annoyance. It's not about superiority, Dr. Volkov, Zara countered, her voice gaining strength, refusing to wilt under his gaze. It's about a different kind of observation. A subtle shift in tissue tension, a faint vibration indicative of a pressure differential, a venous microtear that could be causing a slow, localized expansion of edema, not visible as a macroscopic lesion, but enough to trigger those atypical, almost phantom signs. I can feel the subtle venous pressure changes around the cranium, the minute fluctuations that standard ICP monitoring might miss if the tear isn't causing a major hemorrhage, but rather a contained, localized fluid shift. She knew it sounded esoteric, even unscientific, but she had felt it before, in others, and it had saved them. As Zara spoke, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker crossed Mateo's left pupil. It was so brief, so subtle, that Volkov and Lin, engrossed in their dismissal of Zara, almost missed it. But Zara's eyes, honed by years of critical observation, caught it. A silent, minute spasm, gone as quickly as it appeared, but enough to send a fresh surge of urgency through her. There. Did you see that? Zara exclaimed, pointing towards Mateo's face. The left pupil. A momentary, paradoxical constriction. That's not a sign of a dead brain. That's an active, struggling brainstem. Lynn glanced quickly at the pupil, then back at Zara, her lips thinning. Zara, post-mortem reflexes, fasciculations, pupillary hippus, these are all described. They are not indicative of neurological viability. Her voice was firmer now, edged with impatience. You are projecting, Zara. You need to detach. Volkov scoffed. Next, you'll tell us he's wiggling his toes. Nurse Al-Gamdi, you are bordering on insubordination. We are discussing organ retrieval for a city hero. This is a time-sensitive, ethically paramount procedure. You are disrupting the process with unsubstantiated, frankly superstitious, claims. His words were a hammer blow, designed to crush her. The sheer arrogance, the complete disregard for her unique insight, stung more than any physical pain. But the image of Mateo, lying there, a hero reduced to a statistic, spurred her on. The organ donation coordinator, a woman with a sympathetic but professional demeanor, peered in, a silent query on her face. The clock wasn't just ticking, it was screaming. But what if you're wrong? Zara pressed, her voice trembling slightly, but holding firm. What if this isn't just anoxic damage? What if there's a small, treatable cause, hidden, that my palpation can reveal? Just 5 minutes, Dr. Volkov, Dr. Lin. A brief examination. What's the harm in confirming every possible angle, for Captain Rodriguez, for his family? Volkov's face darkened, his jaw clenching. The harm, nurse, is giving false hope. The harm is risking the viability of organs for other patients in desperate need. The harm is undermining the rigorous, evidence-based medicine that Olympus stands for. This is not a research subject, it is a clinical case with a definitive diagnosis. He turned to Lynn. Dr. Lynn, please ensure Nurse Al-Gamdi understands the gravity of her interference. We need to move forward. Lynn gave Zara a look of exasperation, a silent warning. Zara, you've made your point. Now, please, step aside. We have a procedure to coordinate. They effectively dismissed her, turning their backs, resuming their discussion about the logistics of organ donation. Zara felt a profound sense of helplessness wash over her. They wouldn't listen. They couldn't see past their screens and their protocols. The fortress of scientific certainty was impenetrable, and her quiet, human voice, a whisper against the gale of their expertise, was utterly drowned out. Yet, as she watched Mateo's chest rise and fall with the mechanical precision of the ventilator, she knew, with an unshakable certainty, that they were making a terrible, irreversible mistake. The tension in the room, which had been building with every ignored plea, now solidified into a heavy, suffocating weight. She had to find another way. She had to. Zara's heart pounded, a drumbeat of defiance against the hospital's rigid certainty. She spotted Dr. Kwame Ajay, looking utterly drained, scribbling notes by a console. This was her last shot. Dr. Ajay, she whispered, her voice tight with urgency, I know what I saw. I need 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes with Captain Rodriguez. Her eyes pleaded, reflecting a conviction that transcended logic, a belief in the human touch over cold data. Kwame, himself an underdog in the resident hierarchy, paused, his weariness warring with a flicker of curiosity. Sometimes the quiet, overlooked voices need a chance to prove themselves, don't they? If you're rooting for the underdog, for the belief that intuition and dedication can triumph, then you're exactly who we're telling this story for. Hit that subscribe button and join us as Zara fights for Mateo's life. Can she convince Kwame? You won't want to miss what happens next, *. The dismissal by Dr. Volkov and Dr. Lin wasn't just a rejection of her words, it was a physical barrier, their backs turning, their voices receding into the technicalities of organ procurement. Zara felt the cold sting of their certitude, a scientific fortress impervious to her quiet dissent. But beneath the profound sense of helplessness, a steel core hardened within her. Mateo Rodriguez wasn't merely a patient, he was a human being, vibrant and alive just days ago, and a lingering tremor, a subtle asymmetry in his fixed gaze, refused to align with their pronouncements of absolute brain death. She knew. Her hands, calloused and sensitive from years of feeling for the delicate whispers of life in broken bodies, knew. There was only one path left. It was a perilous one, a direct defiance of hierarchy and protocol, but the alternative was a certainty Zara could not bear. Her gaze swept the room, bypassing the senior doctors who were already lost in their logistical discussions. Her eyes landed on Dr. Kwame Ajay. He was standing slightly apart, his shoulders hunched, running a hand over his close-cropped hair, a gesture of weariness that resonated deeply with her own anxiety. Junior residents like Kwame were often caught between the demands of their superiors and the gnawing doubts of their own nascent medical instincts. He looked tired, perhaps even disillusioned. He might be her only chance. Taking a deep, silent breath, Zara moved. Her steps were deliberate, quiet, cutting across the sterile linoleum. "Dr. Ajay," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, yet imbued with an intensity that made him start. Kwame turned, his brow furrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Nurse Algambi? Didn't you hear Dr. Volkov? We're past the diagnostic stage. It's just logistics now." His voice was low, tinged with a resignation that spoke volumes. "No, Dr. Ajay. We're not," Zara countered, her gaze unwavering, locking onto his. She spoke quickly, urgently, her words spilling out, concise and precise, stripped of any emotional plea. "I've been observing Captain Rodriguez for the last hour. His pupils, while fixed, show a subtle anisocoria that's fluctuating, not static. His corneal reflex is absent, yes, but there's a micro-oscillation in his left palpebral muscle I've only ever seen in cases of incomplete brainstem herniation, often related to focal vascular compromise." Kwame's irritation morphed into something akin to bewilderment. He glanced nervously towards Volkov and Lin, who were thankfully still engrossed in their conversation by a monitor. "Nurse, I understand your concern, but the high-res MRI, the CT angiogram, the transcranial Doppler, they all confirm intractable cerebral edema and no active vascular lesions. His brainstem reflexes are absent. The neurophysiology consult was definitive. And that's precisely why it's missed," Zara pressed, leaning in slightly, her voice dropping lower. "In environments where advanced imaging is a luxury, where we rely on our hands and our eyes, we learn to feel for the in-between. The microtear, Dr. Ajay. A vascular microtear, too fine for standard resolution, masked by the sheer volume of edema, perhaps on a vessel not typically scanned with high fidelity. It's causing subtle, localized pressure fluctuations, insufficient to register as a major bleed, but enough to create a paradoxical microinstability within the compressed brainstem." She paused, letting the unconventional explanation sink in. "My experience in war zones taught me to palpate for these. For incredibly subtle shifts in tissue turgor, for micropulsations in the dura, for variations in arterial wall resistance that sophisticated machines, designed to see gross pathology, often overlook. It's a method developed out of necessity, a human MRI of sorts, focused on the microneurological. Give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes, Dr. Ajay, to palpate. If I find nothing, I'll step aside, and you can proceed. But if I find what I suspect..." Her voice trailed off, but her eyes held the unspoken weight. "Then we save him." Kwame stared at her, caught between professional skepticism and a faint, flickering hope. He was exhausted from days of futility, from watching a hero succumb, and perhaps, a tiny, rebellious part of him yearned for an alternative to the grim certainty. He knew Zara's reputation as a quiet, exceptionally capable nurse. And her description of her unique skill, while bordering on the outlandish, resonated with a deep, almost ancient understanding of medicine that sometimes got lost amidst the high-tech cacophony. He thought of the times his own intuition had been stifled, dismissed. 5 minutes. What was 5 minutes, in the face of absolute finality? He looked at Mateo, then back at Zara. "What do you need?" he asked, his voice barely audible, a profound gamble in itself. "Privacy, and for you to trust my hands," she replied, already moving towards Mateo's bedside. "And perhaps..." She paused, glancing at the small, portable ultrasound unit usually used for vascular access, sitting on a cart near the emergency crash cart. Perhaps, if you have access to a handheld ultrasound with a high-frequency transducer, you could be ready to confirm. Discreetly. Kwame understood. He nodded, a single, decisive movement. He grabbed the compact ultrasound, its probe nestled in a sterile sheath, and brought it closer, preparing it silently, ensuring the screen was angled away from the main observation station. This was it. A rogue mission, in the heart of Olympus Medical. Zara gently adjusted Mateo's head, ensuring his neck was in a neutral position, his breathing tube secure. She pulled the sheet down slightly, exposing his neck in the base of his skull. She took a moment, closing her eyes, centering herself. All the noise, the pronouncements, the despair, faded. Only Mateo remained, and the quiet conversation between her hands and his unresponsive body. Her fingers, long and slender, yet surprisingly strong, began their delicate dance. She started at the carotid triangle, assessing the superficial arterial pulses, then moved towards the posterior triangle, feeling for subtle changes in tissue turgor and lymphatic flow, markers of deeper vascular stresses. Her touch was feather-light, yet discerning. She worked her way along the sternocleidomastoid, tracing the pathways of major vessels, feeling not just the pulse, but the minute variations in the vessel wall's compliance. Her technique was unlike any standard physical exam. It was a practiced attunement to microresistances, to the almost imperceptible vibrations that spoke of aberrant flow, of pressure differentials too small for casual detection. She moved her hands higher, towards the mastoid process, her fingertips ghosting over the nuchal lines, then carefully, meticulously, exploring the suboccipital region, where the vertebral arteries ascended towards the foramen magnum. This was the intricate, vulnerable network that fed the brainstem, a common nexus for deep-seated microtrauma. Her brow furrowed in concentration, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. She felt for the slightest asymmetry, the most minute deviation in warmth and elasticity, and the phantom thrum that sometimes indicated a localized increase in metabolic activity or a subtle vascular spasm. Then, there. Just beneath the base of the left mastoid process, a fraction of an inch from where the internal carotid typically branched, Zara felt it. Not a throbbing aneurysm, not a palpable hematoma. It was a shudder. A fleeting, almost imperceptible micro-oscillation, a difference in the tissue's resilience, a sensation like a faint, localized ripple in a perfectly still pond. It was infinitesimally subtle, a signature of disturbed flow, a minuscule pocket of abnormal pressure. The surrounding tissue felt subtly firmer, more resistant to the light touch, as if bracing against an internal strain. It wasn't a static finding, it was a dynamic, fluctuating signature, confirming her initial observation of the anisocoria and the palpable tremor. A microtear. Her breath caught in her throat. Here, Zara whispered, her voice tight with suppressed urgency, her eyes still closed, keeping her fingers precisely on the spot. Dr. Ajay. Focus your probe here. High frequency. Look for a vascular anomaly, however small. A microtear, perhaps in a deep perforating branch of the posterior communicating artery, or even a subtle dissection in the initial segment of the vertebral artery, causing localized ischemia and pressure. Kwame, his heart thumping, carefully applied the gel to the tiny high-frequency linear array probe. His hands trembled slightly as he placed it exactly where Zara's fingers still rested, her touch guiding his. He activated the Doppler, adjusted the gain and depth, his gaze fixed on the screen. The initial images showed the expected cerebral edema, obscuring much of the deeper structures. But then, as he painstakingly micro-adjusted the angle, tilting the probe with the precision Zara had taught him, a faint shadow began to resolve. A disruption. Not a full tear, not a gushing bleed, but a distinct, localized discontinuity in the vascular wall, a hairline fracture in a vessel no larger than a hair itself, causing a turbulent, almost imperceptible eddy current of blood flow, a swirl where there should have been laminar perfection. It was an incredibly subtle finding, easily missed by conventional scans focused on larger pathologies, but unmistakable now that he knew precisely where to look, guided by Zara's almost mystical touch. His eyes widened in disbelief, then horror. "Oh my God," he breathed, the words escaping him in a ragged whisper. The image flickered on the screen, undeniably showing a minute, focal compromise in a deep-seated vessel. "She's right. You're absolutely right." The fortress of scientific certainty, built on scans and protocols, had just been breached by the quiet, sensitive hands of a rookie nurse and the desperate, illicit scan of a weary resident. Mateo Rodriguez was not brain-dead. He was suffering from an elusive, treatable injury, silently suffocating under the weight of an unacknowledged microtrauma. The weight of this revelation was crushing, immense. They had made a terrible, irreversible mistake, one that could still be undone. The next few minutes would define not just Mateo's fate, but their own. The world outside their small consultation room ceased to exist. Only the grainy, pulsating image on Dr. Ajay's portable ultrasound screen held any reality. Dr. Volkov, alerted by the sudden, panicked silence and Dr. Lin's sharp intake of breath, burst through the door, his face a thundercloud of irritation. "What in the blazes is going on here? We have an organ procurement team en route, and you two are playing with toys?" His gaze fell on the screen, then on Kwame's ashen face, and finally, on Zara, who stood with an unnerving calm, her eyes fixed on the flickering image. "Dr. Volkov," Kwame stammered, his voice tight with a terrifying mix of dread and vindication, we have a problem." He rotated the screen. "Captain Rodriguez isn't brain-dead. Zara. Nurse Al-Gamdi, she was right. There's a microtear. Deep-seated. Likely causing localized ischemia and contributing to the edema." Volkov's eyes, usually sharp and dismissive, narrowed into incredulous slits. He snatched the portable device, his fingers fumbling as he tried to stabilize the probe over Mateo's temple, pressing hard. "Nonsense. My diagnostics are exhaustive. MRI, CT, angiography, all clear of focal lesions of this magnitude." He scrolled through the saved images from Kwame's scan, his brow furrowing deeper with each one. The subtle, almost imperceptible anomaly, a distortion in the facial plane and a minute, irregular pulsation that shouldn't be there, was undeniable even to his skeptical eyes. It was a ghost in the machine, something so small, so elusive, that it mimicked background noise to the untrained eye, or to an algorithm designed for gross pathology. But Zara, and now Kwame, had given it a name. Dr. Lin, typically unflappable, stood frozen. She had meticulously reviewed every scan, every data point. To have missed something so critical, right under her nose, was an affront to her intellect, a shattering blow to her professional identity. Her mind raced, reevaluating the subtle tremors Zara had mentioned, the atypical pupillary responses she herself had dismissed. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. But how? Lin finally managed, her voice barely a whisper, directed at Zara. "How could we have missed it? What did you feel?" Zara stepped forward, her quiet voice cutting through the stunned silence. "The edema was global, yes, but the tremor wasn't. It was localized, a microtremor, radiating from a specific point. And the tissue density, it was different. Not just swelling, but a subtle, almost vibrational difference, like a tiny rupture creating a ripple effect in the surrounding parenchyma, too small to show up as a clear bleed on a CT, but enough to disrupt normal perfusion and exacerbate the anoxic injury." She looked at Volkov. The scans looked for contrast extravasation, for significant shifts. "This isn't a bleed, Dr. Volkov. It's a microperforation, possibly a small arterial tear, allowing a slow, insidious leak or just causing local pressure and inflammation that disrupted blood flow in a critical area, amplifying the anoxic damage." Volkov's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and finally, a chilling realization. A city hero. A misdiagnosis. The implications were catastrophic. His career. The hospital's reputation. But beneath the professional terror, a flicker of the physician's core instinct ignited, save the patient. Or 5. "Now!" Volkov roared, the command echoing through the silent corridor. "Stat! Get anesthesia, neuro team." I want Dr. Chen on standby for vascular, Dr. Ramirez on neuro ICU. We're scrubbing in for an emergency craniotomy. And get Zara Al-Ghamdi gowned. She's assisting. The hospital, moments before resigned to Mateo's death, erupted into a frantic ballet of organized chaos. Nurses and residents sprinted, orderlies pushed trolleys at breakneck speed. Within minutes, Mateo was being prepped, his head shaved, antiseptic scrubbed. Zara, heart-pounding but mind clear, was ushered to scrub. The sterile soap felt strangely grounding in the whirlwind. Inside O5, the air crackled with a potent mix of urgency and disbelief. Dr. Volkov, already gowned and gloved, stood over Mateo, microsurgical instruments laid out with terrifying precision. Dr. Lin, scrubbing in beside Zara, offered a curt, almost grudging nod. Nurse Al-Ghamdi, she said, her voice strained, your role here is unprecedented. Do you understand the gravity? We are relying on your unique observation skills for something that no imaging has definitively located. I understand, Dr. Lin, Zara replied, her voice steady. The pressure gradient. The microvibrations. I can feel them. I can guide. Once scrubbed, Zara entered the sterile field, a stark contrast to her usual role. Dr. Volkov, against every protocol, gestured for her to stand immediately beside him, on Mateo's left. You said radiating from a point. Show me. Zara, gloved, gently placed her fingers on the shaved scalp, feeling the subtle contours of Mateo's skull. Her touch was not diagnostic now, but a reaffirmation, a mental map of what lay beneath. Here, Dr. Volkov, she indicated a spot high temporal, slightly posterior to the pterion, but deeper than a superficial bleed would indicate. About here. The microtear is deep, likely a perforating vessel supplying the basal ganglia or thalamus, or perhaps a venule that was compressed and ruptured. The localized edema and microischemia are the result. Volkov nodded curtly, his skepticism battling with Mateo's precarious state. Scalpel. Let's make a temporal craniotomy. Standard approach for deep lesions. The initial incision was swift and clean, tracing the curve of Mateo's temple. Blood welled, instantly blotted by suction. The temporal muscle was carefully dissected, retracted. Then came the craniotomy itself, the high-speed drill biting into bone, creating burr holes, then the craniotome connecting them, separating a circular bone flap. With a soft clink, the bone was lifted, revealing the shimmering, vascularized dura mater beneath. Dura is tense, Volkov observed, his voice calm, professional, masking the turmoil beneath. Still significant edema. Yes, doctor, Zara confirmed, her eyes fixed on the pulsating membrane. But the focal point of the pressure, it feels slightly different, a subtler tension here, she said, her gloved finger hovering inches above a specific spot on the dura. Almost a micro-oscillation that's out of sync with the broader pressure. Lin, now assisting Volkov, leaned in, trying to discern what Zara saw, what she felt. But to her, the dura appeared uniformly taut, a milky white canvas under the harsh operating lights. Volkov made a meticulous incision into the dura, opening it like a flower. The cerebral cortex, glistening and swollen, presented itself. The gyrus appeared congested, the sulci flattened, evidence of the pervasive edema. He began the slow, delicate process of navigating through the neural tissue, using a microscope to magnify the intricate landscape. I'm not seeing anything, Nurse Al-Ghamdi, Volkov said, his voice tightening with impatience after several tense minutes of exploration. No gross hematoma, no obvious tear, no vascular anomaly that screams microtear. His frustration was palpable, every millimeter of deviation could mean irreversible damage. Zara's brow furrowed in concentration. Her eyes scanned the exposed brain, but her true sense was internal, a deep physiological empathy. It's not on the surface, Dr. Volkov. It's deeper. The resonance is coming from here. She pointed, her finger incredibly precise, to a specific, almost imperceptible discoloration, a subtle purplish hue no larger than a pinpoint, deep within a sulcus. The tissue quality around this point, it feels like it's vibrating on a different frequency. Like a minute hydraulic leak. Volkov adjusted the microscope, directing it to the area Zara indicated. Under the intense magnification, the subtle anomaly became faintly clearer. A minute spot, slightly paler than the surrounding congested tissue, yet with an almost imperceptible irregular twitch, too subtle for the eye alone to truly register as a definite lesion. "Are you certain, nurse?" he pressed, the weight of the moment immense. One wrong move, and Mateo would be lost forever. "Absolutely, doctor," Zara replied, her voice unwavering. "It's the source of the atypical pulsations. It's what I felt. It's there. A focal point of mechanical stress, causing the localized ischemia and exacerbating the global edema." Volkov hesitated for a fraction of a second, then, making a decision that defied decades of training reliant solely on visual confirmation and scan data, he extended a microdissector, trusting the rookie nurse's uncanny, unscientific intuition. His steady hand began to carefully dissect the delicate layers of brain tissue, guided by Zara's silent, unwavering focus. Under the searing beam of the surgical microscope, the operating theater held its breath. Dr. Volkov's hands, usually moving with an almost arrogant confidence, now trembled with a different kind of intensity, a blend of precise focus and bewildering disbelief. He followed Zara's quiet directives, navigating the fragile landscape of Mateo's brain, each movement painstaking, measured in microns. "There, doctor," Zara's voice, a steady whisper in the hushed room, cut through the high-pitched whine of the suction. "Just anterior to the sulcus, that's where the aberrant flow begins to deviate. The tissue isn't responding normally to the micropulsations." Her eyes, though not pressed against the microscope, seemed to see through it, past it, directly into the core of the problem. She was interpreting the almost imperceptible undulations of the brain tissue, the subtle shifts in hue and texture that only her unique, war-honed tactile sense could have initially detected. Volkov, still squinting into the oculars, moved the microdissector, a tool so fine it resembled a wisp of spun metal, with agonizing slowness. He saw what she described, a minuscule area, barely larger than a grain of sand, where the delicate pial layer seemed to ripple unevenly, a focal point of almost imperceptible vascular stress. It was not a clear tear, not a rupture, but a subtle, insidious avulsion of a tiny arteriole, perhaps a terminal branch of a perforating artery, so fine it had escaped even the most advanced angiographic scrutiny. It was leaking plasma and inflammatory mediators, not overtly bleeding, but creating a localized zone of hypoxia and exacerbating the global edema. "I see it," Volkov finally murmured, his voice tight with concentration and a growing sense of awe. "It's a microperforator branch, almost completely occluded by inflammatory exudate, with a distal subpial microhematoma forming." The sight was humbling. It was a ghost of an injury, yet profoundly devastating. "The pulsations," Zara continued, her gaze fixed on the overhead monitor displaying the magnified view, "they're causing a shearing force. It needs to be stabilized, doctor. The pressure gradient across that point is what's contributing to the ongoing cerebral edema." Dr. Maylin, standing opposite Volkov, had shed her initial skepticism. Her expression was now one of profound focus, her keen intellect processing Zara's uncanny observations in real time. She watched the ICP monitor, which, despite the ongoing surgical intervention, had begun a slow, almost imperceptible climb again after a momentary dip. "Intracranial pressure is trending up, Victor," she reported, her voice low. "We need to address this quickly." Volkov nodded, his focus unwavering. "Microsutures, May. 111-0 nylon, straight needle." The scrub nurse presented the impossibly fine suture, its filament almost invisible to the naked eye. Volkov, using microforceps, deftly threaded it through the minuscule avulsion, his movements a testament to decades of practice, now elevated to an almost spiritual plane by Zara's silent guidance. It was like stitching a single strand of silk into a spiderweb. "The distal pulsation is still weak, doctor," Zara noted, her voice steady. "The flow is still compromised. You need to relieve the tension on the adjacent tissue." Volkov adjusted the angle of his hand, ever so slightly, rotating the wrist, and applied a feather-light touch with a specialized microprobe. He released the subtle tension, a barely perceptible pull on the surrounding arachnoid membrane that was kinking the already compromised arteriole. Immediately, under the microscope, a faint blush of improved perfusion became visible in the surrounding brain tissue. "It's improving," Volkov breathed, a quiet exhalation of relief. He tied the first knot, then a second, securing the infinitesimally small tear. The entire repair took no more than 5 minutes of actual suturing, but it felt like an eternity. He then applied a specialized hemostatic sealant, a translucent biocompatible gel, to reinforce the repair and prevent any further inflammatory response. As he slowly withdrew his instruments, the silence in the room was absolute. Every eye was on the monitors. "ICP is dropping," Lynn announced, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and wonder. "Rapidly. From 28 millimeters of mercury to 15 mmHg, and still going down." The digital readout plunged further, a cascade of relief washing over the room with each falling number. The cerebral perfusion pressure, CPP, which had been dangerously low, began to climb back into a healthier range. Under the microscope, the previously congested tissue around the repair site began to show signs of improved perfusion, a subtle but distinct shift in color from an ominous gray-white to a healthier, pinker hue. The irregular, struggling pulsations normalized, becoming rhythmic, strong, and even. Volkov slowly pulled back from the microscope, his face pale but etched with a profound sense of accomplishment and a dawning revelation. He looked at Zara, his eyes wide. It's stable," he said, the words barely audible. He glanced at Lynn, who was staring at Zara with an expression of stunned admiration. "She did it." Lynn, usually reserved and analytical, stepped closer to Zara. "Nurse Al-Ghamdi," she began, her voice unusually soft, "your diagnostic acumen, it's beyond anything I've ever witnessed. You identified a lesion that completely evaded our most advanced imaging technology, a lesion that was actively killing Captain Rodriguez." Volkov cleared his throat, pushing away the microdissector. He extended a hand towards Zara, a gesture of respect he rarely afforded anyone, let alone a rookie nurse. "Zara," he corrected himself, "your unscientific intuition, as I so arrogantly dismissed it, saved his life. There's no other way to put it." His gaze, usually cold and imperious, now held a newfound humility. "You saw what we could not, felt what our machines couldn't register. Your observations were precise, your guidance invaluable." Zara, still composed, offered a small, modest nod. "My experience taught me to look for the subtle signs, Doctor. In places where technology was scarce, human observation was all we had." Kwame, who had remained silent throughout the final, critical phase, now allowed himself a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He caught Zara's eye and offered a tired but triumphant smile. The clandestine ultrasound, the frantic plea, the unwavering belief in Zara, it had all been worth it. Mateo's vital signs continued to stabilize. His brain, no longer under the crushing pressure of intractable edema, began the slow, arduous process of recovery. The battle was far from over, but the war, which had seemed irrevocably lost moments ago, had just found its unlikely champion. In the quiet triumph of that operating theater, the world of Olympus Medical Center, and the lives within it, had irrevocably shifted. The last stitch was secured, the neurosurgical instruments laid aside with a soft clatter that felt unnaturally loud in the hushed operating theater. Dr. Volkov, usually a whirlwind of commanding energy, stood surprisingly still, his gaze fixed on the monitor displaying Mateo's vital signs. The previously alarming intracranial pressure, ICP, readings, which had stubbornly resisted every pharmacological and interventional attempt, were now steadily trending downwards, settling into a reassuringly normal range. The cerebral perfusion pressure, CPP, once perilously low, had also begun its cautious ascent. Dr. Lynn, her mask still on, gently probed the repaired area with a gloved finger, her movements meticulous. She then glanced at Zara, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps awe, perhaps bewildered recalculation, in her usually analytical eyes. "The bleeding has stopped," she murmured, her voice stripped of its usual crisp authority. "The vessel wall is intact." It was exactly where Nurse Al-Ghamdi indicated. The attending surgeons, their faces etched with the fatigue of a high-stakes, unexpected procedure, began the careful process of closing the craniotomy. But their movements, though professional, carried an undertone of wonder. They had followed Zara's palpations, observed her uncanny precision as she guided the repair of a lesion that had eluded the most sophisticated imaging. Volkov slowly removed his surgical mask, revealing a face devoid of its customary arrogance, replaced by a profound, almost reverent seriousness. He turned to Zara, who was still standing by Mateo's head, her hand lightly resting near the surgical site, as if still monitoring the subtle oscillations beneath the skin. "Nurse Al-Ghamdi," he began, his voice gravelly, "what you accomplished here, it defies conventional medical understanding. You saved Captain Rodriguez's life." Zara offered a small, self-effacing smile. "It was a team effort, Dr. Volkov. Everyone played their part." Her gaze briefly met Kwame's, who stood a little apart, observing the scene with a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. He had believed in her, taken the risk, and now watched her being validated in the most dramatic fashion possible. Mateo was transferred to the neurocritical care unit, his progress meticulously charted. Within hours, the subtle signs of improvement became more evident. His pupils, previously sluggish and unequal, now reacted briskly to light, becoming isochoric. The faint, intermittent tremor Zara had initially observed had vanished. The edema, once so pervasive, was receding, allowing the brain's delicate tissue to begin its slow decompression. Though still intubated and sedated, Mateo's neurological status had irrevocably shifted from the precipice of brain death to a state of profound but recoverable injury. The Glasgow Coma Scale, previously a terrifying 3, had begun its halting climb. News of the unprecedented intervention spread through Olympus Medical Center like wildfire. "The brain-dead firefighter saved by a rookie nurse's touch" was the whispered headline in every hallway, every break room. Doctors, nurses, and even administrative staff found themselves drawn into the orbit of Zara Al-Ghamdi's extraordinary story. Skepticism battled with undeniable results. How could a manual technique supersede MRI, CT, and advanced cerebral angiography? Yet, Mateo Rodriguez, the living proof, lay testament to it. A few days later, a special meeting was convened by the hospital board, an unusual gathering usually reserved for major policy shifts or financial crises. Dr. Volkov, in a stark reversal of his previous stance, presented the case. He laid out the timeline, the initial diagnosis, the intractable edema, and Zara's unconventional observations. He then detailed her intervention, the precise palpation, Dr. Ajay's illicit but confirming portable ultrasound scan, and the subsequent, successful surgery. He omitted no detail, even his own initial dismissal. "We have always prided ourselves on our cutting-edge technology, our adherence to evidence-based protocols," Volkov concluded, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of his colleagues. "But in this case, our technology failed us. Our protocols, designed to ensure safety and efficacy, blinded us to an anomaly. And a young nurse, relying on skills honed in circumstances far removed from this opulent facility, saw what we could not." Dr. Lin, uncharacteristically subdued, elaborated on the subtle neurological signs Zara had detected. The microtear was located deep within the posterior cerebral artery territory, extremely difficult to visualize even with high-resolution sequences due to its size and the surrounding edema. Nurse Al-Ghamdi's palpation detected a pulsatile irregularity, a minute thrill, indicative of turbulent flow or a focal vascular wall weakness that was imperceptible to any other method. Her ability to localize this with such accuracy is, frankly, unparalleled. The room buzzed with a mixture of disbelief and growing admiration. The board chairman, Dr. Elias Thorne, a man known for his astute judgment, finally spoke. "Nurse Al-Ghamdi, you have demonstrated a skill that transcends our current understanding of diagnostic medicine. Can you enlighten us on the origins of this unique ability?" Zara, seated at the back of the room, felt the weight of every eye. She smoothed the creases of her scrub uniform, her composure unwavering. "My training wasn't conventional, Dr. Thorne," she began, her voice soft but clear, carrying to every corner of the large conference room. After nursing school, I volunteered with Doctors Without Borders. My deployments took me to conflict zones, places where resources were almost non-existent. Remote field hospitals, makeshift clinics, and refugee camps. She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to sink in. We had no MRI machines, often not even a reliable ultrasound. Sometimes, not even X-rays. Patients arrived with horrific injuries, blast trauma, penetrating wounds, head injuries from collapsed structures. Many suffered subtle, internal bleeding or vascular damage that wouldn't show up on a basic physical exam but would quickly prove fatal. To survive, to help our patients survive, we had to rely on our senses. We learned to feel, to listen, to observe every minute change in skin temperature, in tissue turgor, in the quality of a pulse, the texture beneath the fingertips. Neurological trauma was particularly challenging. I spent countless hours practicing, learning to identify minute abnormalities in intracranial pressure dynamics, subtle vascular disruptions, not through screens, but through the delicate art of palpation on the scalp, the fontanelles, even the carotid arteries. It was a skill born of necessity, of scarcity. A desperate attempt to bridge the gap left by absent technology. Her explanation resonated deeply. The room, initially filled with skepticism, was now suffused with a profound respect. This wasn't some mystical gift, it was a hard-earned, intensely practical skill, forged in the crucible of extreme adversity. Dr. Thorne nodded slowly. A skill born of necessity. And now, a necessity for us. Olympus Medical Center, for all its advancements, risks becoming too reliant on technology, perhaps overlooking the fundamental diagnostic tools of human observation and touch. Nurse Al-Ghamdi, your experience has revealed a critical blind spot in our elite institution. That afternoon, a unanimous decision was reached. Olympus Medical Center would establish a new division, the Center for Observational Diagnostics. Its mandate would be to integrate advanced human observation and tactile assessment techniques with high-tech diagnostics, ensuring a holistic approach to patient care, particularly in complex, undifferentiated cases. Dr. Volkov himself proposed that Zara Al-Ghamdi be appointed its inaugural director. Zara, despite the overwhelming recognition, remained remarkably humble. When approached with the offer, she responded, "I am honored, Dr. Thorne. But my focus remains on patient care. This isn't about me, it's about giving patients the best chance, using every tool at our disposal, even the oldest ones." Her humility, rather than diminishing her impact, only amplified it. She insisted on a collaborative model, working closely with junior residents like Kwame and even senior staff like Dr. Lin, to develop the curriculum and protocols for the new center. Her first initiative was a mandatory workshop for all neuro residents and critical care nurses, focusing on advanced palpation techniques and the critical role of subtle observational cues. Mateo Rodriguez, meanwhile, was slowly but surely awakening. Days after the surgery, he was extubated. His first words, though raspy and slurred, were a whispered, "Anna," his wife's name. It was a sound that brought tears to the eyes of his family, and a quiet, immense satisfaction to Zara. His long journey to recovery had just begun, but he was on the road, thanks to a quiet nurse who dared to trust her hands, her experience, and her belief in the profound truths hidden beneath the surface. The heart of Olympus Medical Center, once beating to the rhythm of machines, had just discovered the pulse of human intuition. Mateo Rodriguez's first whispered word, "Anna," was a fragile bridge back to a life teetering on the brink. The immediate post-extubation period was precarious. His brain, starved of oxygen, now wrestled with the trauma of reperfusion injury and the subtle scar of the microtear. While the surgical repair had been a triumph, the damage from anoxia was pervasive. His neurological examination revealed significant deficits, left-sided weakness, expressive aphasia that left him struggling for words, and profound cognitive fog. Days blurred into weeks of intense neurorehabilitation. Physical therapists worked to coax movement back into his atrophied limbs, occupational therapists helped him relearn the simplest tasks like holding a spoon, and speech therapists painstakingly rebuilt his vocabulary, one syllable at a time. Each flicker of recognition, each clumsy step, was a monumental victory celebrated by Anna, their children, and by Zara, who frequently checked on his progress, a silent guardian in the background. Zara, true to her nature, embraced her new role as the director of observational diagnostics with a quiet fervor that belied the monumental shift she was initiating. She refused the spacious, executive office offered to her, opting instead for a smaller, more accessible space near the critical care units. Her program was not about flashy technology, but about recalibrating the human sensorium. Mandatory workshops for all residents and attending physicians, especially those in neurology, critical care, and emergency medicine, became the norm. She taught with the same hands-on, empathetic approach she used in the war zones, the art of reading the body's whispers, the nuances of skin pallor, the subtle shifts in muscle tone, the almost imperceptible changes in pupillary reflex that even advanced monitors could miss. She brought in simulated patients, demonstrating her palpation techniques, challenging the residents to feel for the invisible, to trust their proprioception over the glowing screens. Her methods were initially met with skepticism by some, but the undeniable evidence of Mateo's survival and her direct, non-judgmental teaching style gradually won them over. For Dr. Viktor Volkov, the consequences were swift and brutally public, within the closed world of Olympus Medical Center. The internal review, though discreetly managed, concluded with a damning indictment of his diagnostic over-reliance on technology and his dismissive arrogance. His position as head of neuro was untenable. He was stripped of his administrative duties, relegated to a research-only role with no direct patient contact, and placed on mandatory sabbatical for professional development. The public explanation cited a desire for new leadership in a rapidly evolving field, but everyone knew the truth. Volkov, a man whose identity was intricately woven with his power and prestige, became a ghost in the gleaming corridors, his former authority an echo. His brilliant, tech-centric approach, once the hallmark of Olympus, now stood as a stark contrast to the human-centric revolution Zara was quietly orchestrating. Dr. Mei Lin, as chief resident, faced a different, perhaps more insidious, form of reckoning. Her career, once on a meteoric trajectory, was now marked by a significant asterisk. While not demoted, her path to an attending physician position was put on hold. She was assigned a mandatory clinical immersion within Zara's new observational diagnostics program, tasked with assisting in curriculum development and attending all workshops. The humiliation was profound for a woman who prided herself on being at the vanguard of medical science. Yet, Zara, devoid of ego, treated Lin not as a subordinate, but as a colleague to be taught and mentored. In those sessions, watching Zara meticulously explain the anatomical basis of her palpation, Lin began to see beyond the protocols. She observed the subtle artistry, the deep anatomical knowledge, and the profound empathy required. The protocols, she realized, were guideposts, not infallible laws. Lin, initially resentful, slowly found herself captivated, the analytical rigor of her own mind now applied to understanding this new, unscientific dimension of medicine. She started to learn what it truly meant to see a patient. Mateo's recovery, meanwhile, was a testament to human resilience and the precision of Zara's intervention. After months, he could walk with a cane, his speech still had a slight cadence from the aphasia, but he could hold complex conversations. He returned to his home, a hero not just for his bravery in the fire, but for his fight to reclaim his life. He frequently visited Olympus, not as a patient, but as a symbol. His presence, a living testament to Zara's unique skill, solidified the hospital's commitment to its new observational paradigm. He even participated in some of Zara's workshops, sharing his experience of being in there while the world thought he was gone, emphasizing the importance of those who listened to the silent pleas of the body. Zara, for her part, never sought the grand spotlight. She continued to wear her modest nurse's scrubs, though now they came with a quiet authority that commanded respect from even the most senior attending physicians. She taught, she mentored, she continued to see patients, often called in for complex cases where standard diagnostics failed. Her life remained grounded, authentic, her expertise not a source of pride, but a profound responsibility. She often spent evenings volunteering at local community clinics, her hand still finding comfort in the direct, unvarnished connection with those who needed her touch most. Olympus Medical Center, once a fortress of technological hubris, had been softened, its hard edges rounded by the truth that sometimes the most sophisticated answers lie not in algorithms or advanced imaging, but in the trained hand and the empathetic heart. The culture of Olympus had transformed, becoming a richer tapestry woven with both cutting-edge technology and time-honored human observation. Junior residents now learned to palpate with a reverence previously reserved for reading MRI scans. Nurses, emboldened by Zara's ascent, found their voices amplified, their unique insights valued. Zara, standing before a new cohort of residents during their introductory lecture on observational diagnostics, concluded with a gentle smile. Mateo Rodriguez, she said, her voice soft but resonating, taught us a profound lesson. He reminded us that the human body is an exquisite, complex narrative, and sometimes, the quietest voices hold profound truths, truths you can only hear when you truly learn to listen and truly learn to feel. The new paradigm was not about rejecting technology, but embracing a holistic medicine where the human touch was, once again, the most vital diagnostic tool. Mateo's long journey to full recovery was still ongoing, but he walked it on a path illuminated by Zara's unwavering belief in the unseen. Zara's quiet wisdom, forged in adversity, became Olympus Medical's guiding principle. Sometimes, the quietest voices hold profound truths. Her story isn't just about saving Mateo, it's a powerful reminder that true innovation often comes from embracing humility and trusting subtle cues overlooked by conventional wisdom. It's about valuing the human element, the skilled touch, the observant eye, the compassionate heart, alongside advanced technology. What did you find most inspiring in Zara's triumph? Have you ever witnessed a quiet voice make a profound difference? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives. If Zara's journey resonated with you, and you believe in the power of stories that champion the human spirit, please subscribe for more narratives that challenge the status quo and inspire profound change. Let this be a call to listen more deeply, to see beyond the obvious, and to always champion the quiet truths waiting to be discovered.